Welcome to DES Trucks. In today's video, we're going to be doing an oil change on our 2019 F250, and this is going to be a good one because we are switching this truck to AMSOIL full synthetic motor oil. Now guys, this is something I wanted to do for a while, but I could never find this stuff on the shelf in the auto parts store. So I just broke down finally and went to AMSOIL.com and I ordered this stuff from the internet, and guys, it came shipped to the front door within one day. So the next day I had this product on my front door, and it actually turned out to be a lot easier than going to the auto parts store and trying to find your oil, whatever brand you want to use. Hopefully it's there. I mean, as you guys know, or probably know, that a lot of times if you're looking for maybe Mobil 1 or Pennzoil Platinum, sometimes it's just not there. You got to go to another store, and going through AMSOIL.com is extremely easy, and the cost was about $111, which is just a little bit more than what it would cost at the dealership, but then I have to turn around and do the work. So, you know, it is one of those things where it is a little bit more cost. But the reason that I want to do this and use the AMSOIL oil and filter, I also have the filter as well, is because this truck will most likely go 1 year between oil changes. And the reason for that is it just doesn't get the miles, like way under the miles, between oil changes. So it does see some pretty heavy use. It does see snow plowing and towing and all that. But even if I changed it at half the interval, it's still going to be a year. We just don't drive a whole lot of miles in our business. So even though we work every day, we stay in such a small area that it just doesn't rack up the miles. So we got the whole deal. We got 7 quarts here. Here's our new AMSOIL filter. And the reason I like these AMSOIL oil filters is because they have a really nice synthetic media compared to the other competitors that use the paper media, which is nothing wrong with that, but this filter is a big reason why this oil change can be good for 1 year. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Let's go ahead and change the oil. I don't need to jack up this truck, but I might lift it up just so I can rotate the tires. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Here under the hood, this is what I do. This is inadvertently going to be a how-to video on how to change oil. So this is a typical truck. It's a 6.2 liter gas V8. It's nothing tricky about it like some of these engines that have a plastic drain plug, different style oil filters, you know, canister style oil filters. This is going to be a straightforward oil change. So number one, when I change the oil, the first thing that is recommended is to run the engine, warm up the oil, and then let it cool off, because you don't want it to be so hot that you're going to get burned, but you don't want it to be cold. And the idea is that it doesn't flow as good when it's cold. So use your best judgment there. I think it's okay if it's cold, or if it's, you know, you don't want it to be too hot, obviously. But one thing that I like to do is I like to pull the dipstick up just a little bit. You can obviously check the oil, but I like to pull the dipstick up just a little bit, and what that does is lets air into the crankcase, which helps the oil flow out a little bit better, a little bit smoother. And also I like to loosen up the oil fill cap, and that also helps to allow. Now I'll just loosen it and I'll just set it there. I don't need to set it anywhere else. I do want this to be closed, somewhat safe. I don't want anything getting in there, any dust or anything getting in there, dirt, but I want air to flow through. So just enough so that it is open to airflow, and the dipstick's up to allow airflow into the crankcase. Then we go underneath the truck and we loosen up the drain plug. See you guys underneath. Alright, so underneath the truck here, and I'm gonna go ahead and loosen up the drain plug here. Now the way to loosen this is lefty loosey, and the way that I know that it's the proper way to turn it is I put my left hand in front of me, and I imagine that I'm turning the fastener, pushing away from my body, holding the fastener with my left hand. That's always lefty-loosey for me. That's how I know which way to loosen. So I never really get confused. But the way this is loosened is lefty-loosey. Now this has been on here for a year, so if this is really tight and I can't loosen it, I can add leverage by getting another wrench and putting it on the bottom of the wrench here. But I think this will be good. It's a pretty large wrench. I can actually move that out of the way. Let's see if I can get it loose. So yeah, it's pretty tight. You could also tap on it, but it's pretty tight. I don't want to go too hard. I'm gonna grab some more leverage. Be right back in 1 second. So yeah, I've gotten more leverage here. Now the danger of just pushing through it, even though, you know, I didn't push as hard as I could, but if I just push, you know, too hard, then once it breaks loose, my hand goes flying off, and I could bang my knuckles. But also it's a good idea to make sure that you got a good fit. I've got a pretty good fit here, and just to add the leverage, simply take your wrench and go like this through the wrench. That gives it more leverage, so it's easier to loosen. Like I said, this has been on here for a long time, so it's been almost a year, not quite, but I don't really think it's over tightened or anything. It's just, I guess you don't want it to come loose, right? But anyway, another thing to understand is the oil is gonna spray pretty far, so I like to keep the pan scooted back just a bit, so that when it comes out, it doesn't overshoot the pan. So we'll see if I can get this right. Another thing is going ahead and loosening this with your hand, and it's gonna be a little messy, so it's good to try to keep your arm up out of the way. This one likes to get tight on you as you loosen it, so it needs the wrench is starting to drip. So that's a nice feature. It actually tightens up as you're loosening it, so it can't, or it's not likely to back all the way out, which is probably why it does that. See, if it hits that point, it's not gonna come all the way out, so it's probably designed that way. So that's a cool little feature if someone's gonna leave your drain plug out not tightened up, but makes it a little bit more, I don't know if it's designed that way, if it's just that way. But now that it's loose enough, I want to keep my hands free. I got a hand here on the pan just to move it around, just in case it, you know, goes somewhere, and boom, there we go. So guys, I'm actually doing this oil change cold. Normally I do the oil changes hot, but with this truck you have to reach under here. I'm not on a hoist, I'm crawling around underneath the truck. I'm right by the converters, by the exhaust, and warming it up would mean getting the exhaust really hot, and then I have to avoid touching the exhaust and avoid getting burned and all that stuff. So I'm actually just going to do it cold, but I'm going to allow a little bit more drain time, and that's just going to be how I do it. So instead of dealing with the hot exhaust and everything, I'm just going to run it cold. So after getting the oil draining, the next step is to loosen up the oil filter. Like I said, lefty-loosey, so I imagine this is the fastener. I'm turning it this way, lefty-loosey, which is going to be this way. So oil filter's not too tight, and I got another pan here. I don't know if I'll need it. It might be better just to catch everything in one. Yeah, it's gonna be better just using one pan. All right, so got my strap here, turning it loose. Oh. Alright, and there goes the oil filter. It fell. Sometimes that happens. That wasn't the goal, but sometimes that does happen. But it landed right in the pan, which is good. So I've got a little bit of drippage here, very minimum. But with both of these out, we're draining down pretty good. But yeah, so I'm gonna actually clean this surface off here with the rag. I'm gonna fill my new AMSOIL filter with new oil, and I got another little trick I'm gonna show you guys that is extra but definitely not required. So anyway, see you guys in the next scene. Alright guys, so one of the things that I like to do is I like to spray out my funnel with some kind of a brake clean, carb clean, something like that, and then I take compressed air and I blow it out because it always gets dusty. It's pretty clean. It's still a little dusty, but it's pretty clean. But I was looking inside my engine and I was just blown away by how clean this motor is. And I've been running full synthetic oil, Motorcraft full synthetic oil, since about 2,000 miles, and it's phenomenally clean. Like there's no carbon, no nothing, but it's only got 10,000 miles, so it's kind of to be expected. But I'm going to show you guys something that is certainly not required, but it's something extra that I like to do, and that is take a little bit of oil. When my drain plug's off, it just finished dripping, I'll take a little bit of oil and pour it through the motor and just kind of rinse out the bottom of the pan. Now, this doesn't really do anything. It's not necessary. It's just a little bit of OCD that I have, and I don't know, it's just something I like to do. So I'm not gonna use the full synthetic oil, the AMSOIL, but I am gonna use full synthetic platinum. I'm just gonna pour a little bit through and kind of rinse down the bottom of the pan. And what this, in theory, in my little theory, what this is doing is it's picking up anything. Oh, don't spill it. Just a little bit, and that's just gonna drain. I spilled a little. I'm gonna wipe it up, but that's just gonna drain down and just wash out the pan. So in theory, what this is gonna do is it's gonna pick up the little bit of dust that it's gonna pick up the little bit of dust that I didn't get from the funnel, which the funnel is pretty clean. Like I said, I took a solvent to it, air, but it's gonna also carry whatever else is in the pan. And as you can see, that clean oil is just pouring out of the bottom, and I'm pretty much good to go, and I can put my plug in there. So another thing that I do that is recommended by some, it's not actually, I'm not sure if this is actually recommended from the manufacturer, but it's definitely not a bad thing to do if you can, and that is to fill up your oil filter with oil. So in our case, it is possible to fill the oil filter with oil because the oil filter spins upright so that I don't have to leak it out when I'm filling it up. Now keep in mind, if you don't do this step, the oil pump will almost instantaneously fill this oil filter and pump through the motor. But it's just something that I like to do whenever possible. Sometimes you can only get it about halfway full because the because the oil filter is not mounted in a way that you can do it this way. Sometimes the oil filter is mounted like upside down or something, and you literally can't do this. It's not a big deal, you know. The oil pump itself, like I said, fills your oil filter really quickly, really quickly. So yeah, that's pretty much full. Seemed like it took like a half a quart. And another thing that I like to do is to take a little clean oil and put it on the ring of the rubber gasket of the oil filter. So yep, so we're full of AMSOIL here. Now let's get back underneath the truck and install our drain plug. Alright guys, so back underneath the truck, and it's still dripping just a little bit because, like I said, I poured a little bit of that Pennzoil Platinum Ultra, maybe like a half a quart, just to kind of flush out the bottom of the pan. That is not a necessary step, but it's just something that I like to do. So I'm going to also take a clean rag and just give it a quick wipe around the oil filter mating surface where now I'm not trying to get any of this into the oil filter area, but just getting it away from, trying to wipe it away from the center. I don't want any of the grit to get into the housing, so I'm wiping it kind of outward, in an outward motion away from the housing. I wonder if you're really LCD, you can do that first a little bit. But anyway, our AMSOIL oil filter is full of oil, and I kept the plastic over the top throughout this process. Like I said, I don't want anything getting into my oil filter. So going on here, carefully starting the threads, not to cross thread this, being gentle, no tools on it while you're starting it. Get it finger tight, and then right now is when I tighten it up. So I'm just going to use this little rag to kind of give me a little bit more grip. And now, as far as tightening the oil filter, I like to tighten it up pretty hard by hand, but not with a tool. So I'll just tighten it pretty tight by hand. I don't use a tool on it. I just get it pretty hard, pretty much as tight as I can by hand. And for me, that's good enough. I don't go crazy, but I'm also not using any tools. So that's tight. Then, last but not least, we have our drain plug. Our drain plug going in. Again, starting it by hand. This is critical because if you damage your oil pan, you're in trouble. And I've also cleaned off the drain plug. Like I say, I don't want to introduce any foreign materials or objects into the oil. We're underneath the truck here on concrete, and I don't want anything to get into the, or any sand or anything to get into my oil. So now I'm going to tighten this up. It almost seems like it needs a wrench. Doesn't really want to go too easily by hand. Probably a safety feature, but I'm not sure. Anyway, but always make sure you start it by hand and it's not cross-threaded. It's virtually impossible to cross-thread the first few threads with your fingers, unless you got Mike Tyson fingers. Alright, so now that it's tight, it's time to snug it up. So how tight do you want it? You know, it's a good idea to torque this if you can. My battery's dead on my torque wrench, so I can't torque it, but we'll go ahead and give it a good turn. That's good enough, guys. You know, as you saw when we loosened it, it was pretty tight. So that's tight enough. You don't want to break nothing. We're gonna go ahead and make sure that we can't get anything
else out of this oil filter. I like to use a rag because keep in mind it is oily, so if you're just using your hand and you're trying to tighten this and call it good by hand, but your hand's slipping off with all the oil, it's, you know, it could be a little loose. But I like to use a rag with tightening the oil filter. That's pretty good there, nice and tight. No tools. If you want, you could possibly put your oil filter wrench tool on there, and some vehicles it is required if you're doing like diesel fuel filters and big diesel oil filters. It is on some vehicles recommended to give it a half a turn with the wrench, with the oil filter wrench. But in this case, just tight by hand, pretty tight by hand. If you don't have real strong hands, go ahead and, you know, not everybody's as strong as me, so you could, you know, put your wrench on here and give it a little, you know, crank if you want. You know, it's not required if you feel confident, but if you don't feel confident, just give it a little turn like that with the wrench and it'll be fine. You don't need to be turning it 10 times over, you know, with the wrench, but just a little crank with the wrench is not bad. But we've got our drain plug tight, we've got our oil filter on. Let's go ahead and go back up top and let's add our oil.
All right, guys, so we got our 7 quarts of oil lined up here. This quart was already started because we put oil in our oil filter, but we're gonna go ahead and pour our oil inside our engine. So let's go ahead and set this up here. Let's pour our oil. All right, so that's the last quart going in. We got 6 quarts here lined up empty, and we got a quart there draining in. Now, a couple things to note with these Fords is this O-ring over the life of the vehicle will degrade. So I think it's a good idea to put a little bit of your oil on this before you reinstall it. And the same thing with the dipstick. It has a small O-ring that doesn't always get any lubrication up toward it. So if you look, this O-ring here over the life of the vehicle will kind of rot away because it doesn't get oil, even though it might not be enough. If you have a little residual oil left over, it's not a bad idea to just drip some of that love onto that O-ring there and O-ring right here on the oil cap. But this is an interesting oil change. I've never done an oil change on a cold vehicle. It's interesting. It drained out real nice. You know, usually the procedure has always been for me to warm up the vehicle, get it up to operating temperature, and then let it cool off a little bit. But it seems like a lot of back and forth. Warm it up, cool it off, don't get burned. So to me, while there probably is some negative effect of doing a cold oil change, the idea that you're not going to get burned, the fact that the oil's pretty much settled into the pan of the vehicle, most of your oil is going to be in your pan now instead of up in the engine. You get a more complete change in a sense, and you don't have to worry about getting burned, which is a big factor when you're crawling up underneath the truck and your cats are right there and your exhaust is right there. It's just why get burned? So anyway, last quart going in, just a little drip coming out there, and I'm gonna drip some oil here on that dipstick. We're gonna put everything buttoned up, we're gonna check it, and we're gonna fire it up. See you guys in a second. Alright guys, so checking the oil, it's super clean and it's full right to the first bubble, and it's so clean that it's hard to see, but we're gonna go ahead and start this up and see how it sounds. Alright, let's go ahead and fire it up. Now that's truly a cold start. Truck hasn't been ran yet today. First time running with the AMSOIL full synthetic. Sounds pretty good. Now this is a necessary step to get the most accurate read on the oil. We add 7 quarts to the filter, to the pan, 7 quarts. So it should be dead on, but we'll check just for good measure. Also, while we're running, we're gonna check for any leaks around the oil filter. Make sure we're good under pressure. Looks good, no drips coming down. See our AMSOIL oil filter. But guys, look how close the exhaust is. This is why I did it cold. But there's our AMSOIL oil filter right there. Looking good. Drain plug looks good. No signs of leaks, and truck sounds great. Alright, so we ran the engine and we're gonna let it settle for a few minutes, and in that time we're gonna go ahead and grease those front half shafts we talked about. And how convenient that both half shafts are facing me so that I can very easily grease both sides. But I like to wipe off the actual grease fitting so that you don't end up inadvertently putting any dirt into the joint, into the grease fitting. So I like to go in there with a rag, clean off just the top of it. There it is, you can see it coming out. Alright guys, so I did end up pumping those out a little bit more, those front half shafts, and what I found is pretty much it was full of metal filled black old grease. So I'm curious to if this was ever done on the truck with the works package that I would get from the dealer. It's hard to say. This could be the original grease from the factory. But anyway guys, on to the tire rotation. Alright guys, so I went to rotate the tires on the truck and it turned into a whole can of worms. None of the tires would come off of the truck. They were all seized onto the truck. So I had to kind of come up with a way to get them off. They weren't coming off if I tried to kick them or hit them with a hammer or anything. So I had to get creative in order to get the tires off of the truck. So that turned into a whole nother video, which I am working on editing now. How to get your tires off your vehicle if they are seized onto the vehicle. And I think that's going to be a pretty cool video. Comment below if you can guess how I got the tires off. But hammer didn't work, lubricants didn't work, kicking the tires with my feet didn't work. I had to do something a little bit different. So comment below, let's see if you guys can guess what I did to get the tires off. But that video is being edited right now as we speak, and it's coming up on the channel soon. But anyway guys, thank you for watching DS Trucks. I know this was a long one, but now we are running nothing but the best AMSOIL in our truck. And according to Project Farms independent testing that he's done, AMSOIL is the best oil. So we're running that oil, best trucks on the road, and best oil now that you can get. So thank you for watching. See you guys in the next one. Comment below and hope to hear from you soon. Over and out.